For nearly 5 decades, Bishop T.D. Jakes has stood as one of the most recognizable figures in American Christianity, a man whose voice has shaped sermons, best-selling books, films, and conversations far beyond the walls of any single church. As founder of the Potter's House in Dallas, he built a congregation of roughly 30,000 members and a media presence that reached millions more around the world. But over the past year and a half, his name has dominated headlines for reasons that have little to do with a typical Sunday sermon. A near-fatal medical emergency, a historic handover of leadership, and a bitter legal dispute have all collided in the life of a man many considered untouchable. Now, as 2026 unfolds, people are asking what comes next for the pastor who built an empire and then, almost overnight, had to confront his own mortality. The story begins on November 24th, 2024, during what looked like an ordinary Sunday service at the Potter's House. Jakes was nearing the end of his sermon when he suddenly lowered his microphone and began to shake. Members of his staff rushed to his side as the congregation watched in stunned silence, unsure whether they were witnessing exhaustion, a stroke, or something far worse. Video from the church's stream posted on social media showed the 67-year-old preacher lowering his microphone while starting to shake before he was quickly rushed off stage. In the days that followed, the church described the episode only as a health incident, and in a statement shared via Facebook, church representatives said the founding pastor had received immediate medical attention and was stable under the care of healthcare professionals. That vague description left a vacuum that was quickly filled by speculation, with some online claiming he had suffered a stroke and others fearing the worst. It wasn't until months later, in March 2025, that Jake sat down for an interview and revealed the full truth. He told NBC's Craig Melvin that he hadn't even understood what was happening to him until he was already in the ambulance when a doctor leaned over and told him he had suffered a massive heart attack. What made the moment especially frightening in retrospect was how ordinary it felt at the time. Jakes explained that as long as he remained on stage preaching, he felt completely fine, but the moment he sat down, the adrenaline that had been masking the crisis dropped away and revealed that he had been preaching with half of his heart effectively shut down by a blood clot. There was no chest pain, no numbness, none of the textbook warning signs people are taught to look for. He described the sensation simply as drifting off to sleep and said doctors later told him that if he had arrived just 5 minutes later, he would have been dead on arrival. Perhaps the most striking part of his account was what he experienced while doctors fought to stabilize him. Jakes said he didn't see or feel what the people around him did, and that the strangest part of the whole ordeal was not understanding what was happening until he later watched footage of it on television, because in the moment itself, he simply felt cradled in a way that was peaceful. He has since described it as a glimpse of something beyond this life, a moment that left him shaken not by fear, but by a sense of calm he still struggles to fully explain. Whatever it was, the experience clearly left a mark, and it set in motion a chain of decisions that would reshape the future of the church he had spent nearly 30 years building. For Jakes, surviving that morning forced an uncomfortable question to the surface. What would happen to the Potter's House and to the thousands of people who depended on it if something like that happened again and he wasn't so fortunate? He had founded the church in 1996, growing it from a modest congregation into one of the most influential megachurches in the country, with a media reach that included television broadcasts, conferences, best-selling books, and a role advising U.S. presidents. For years, the idea of Jake stepping back from the pulpit had barely been discussed in public. He was, in many ways, the institution itself. That changed in April 2025, less than 6 months after his heart attack, when Jake stood before his congregation and announced a decision that surprised many longtime members. He told the church that he had seen too many men build something and stay so long that they ended up destroying what they had built, and that especially after November, he could not risk something happening to him and leaving the congregation like sheep without a shepherd. He revealed that his daughter, Sarah Jakes Roberts, and her husband, Pastor Teray Roberts, would become the new co-senior pastors of the ministry, with the transition set to take effect that summer. The announcement marked a major generational shift for the 30,000-member congregation, and Jakes, standing alongside his wife Sarita, thanked the church for their faithfulness, telling them he was deeply grateful for everything they had given him over the years. Church leaders made clear this wasn't a decision made overnight. According to a letter shared by Jakes and the Roberts family, the plan had been developing for years, beginning with the family's move from Los Angeles to Dallas and their appointment as assistant pastors back in 2023, all part of a deliberate effort to balance the needs of the church with the pace of each step in the transition. Jakes himself framed the moment as the beginning of his 50th year in the public spotlight, saying he wanted to focus his remaining energy on issues like economic empowerment and closing opportunity gaps, while making clear that the elevation of Sarah and Teray was not a departure but a rebirth, and that he would never stop preaching or ministering. He retained his position as chairman of the board and spiritual overseer of the church, ensuring he would remain connected to its direction even after handing over day-to-day leadership. The formal installation took place that July in a service the church described in deeply spiritual terms. The Potter's house marked the occasion by posting that a mantle had been passed with power and that a future had been set in motion, describing how Jakes had lifted up a legacy of sacrifice in order to release the next generation into purpose. Reaction online was mixed. While many congregants embraced the moment as an emotional and historic passing of the torch, some social media users pushed back on the optics of a family member inheriting such a prominent pulpit, with one commenter asking what had happened to the idea of being anointed for a role rather than simply being next in line by birth. More recently, in a candid interview, Teray Roberts opened up about the pressure of stepping into that role, explaining that he had felt it was important not to try to become another version of Bishop Jakes, but to lead in a way that honored the house's legacy without losing himself in someone else's shadow. While the health crisis and leadership transition were unfolding, a separate and far messier story was developing in the courts. Just one day after his onstage medical emergency, Jakes filed a defamation lawsuit against a man named Dwayne Youngblood, a Pennsylvania pastor who had appeared on a YouTube talk show accusing Jakes of attempting to grope and sexually assault him decades earlier, when Youngblood was a teenager. Jakes told Today that he filed the suit because he felt that if he never spoke back, the allegations would simply continue indefinitely, and he had decided enough was enough. His legal filing didn't stop at denial. It also pointed out that Youngblood had been convicted of sexually assaulting a minor in 2008 and of corrupting minors in 2014, according to Pennsylvania's sex offender registry, and alleged that Youngblood had sent a letter demanding $6 million to resolve the matter quietly before going public. The lawsuit went further, claiming that Youngblood's allegations had taken a real emotional and physical toll on Jakes, and pointing out that the medical crisis on stage had occurred just one day before the suit was filed. The case quickly became more complicated than a simple he said dispute. Youngblood's brother, Pastor Richard Edwin Youngblood, came forward with his own claims of past abuse by Jakes, and several other individuals filed supporting affidavits as part of a lengthy motion opposing Jakes' defamation suit. At the same time, Jakes' own legal team accused Youngblood's attorney, Tyrone Blackburn, of submitting filings built on fabricated or misapplied case law. Blackburn pushed back hard, arguing that an analysis of Jakes' own opposition brief revealed its own pattern of misquotation and citations that didn't actually support the claims being made, and insisted that the allegations against him were without merit. A federal judge in Pennsylvania allowed the case to move forward in April 2025, rejecting an attempt to have it dismissed under the state's anti-SLAPP protections. After more than a year of motions, accusations of AI-generated filings, and competing affidavits, the case reached an unexpectedly quiet conclusion. In October 2025, the federal defamation lawsuit between Jakes and Youngblood was jointly dismissed without prejudice, a legal outcome that leaves Jakes free to refile the case in the future if new evidence emerges, but does not represent any ruling on the underlying merits of either side's claims. No settlement, apology, or retraction was announced by either party, and representatives for both men declined to comment when asked about the dismissal. Sources close to the church indicated that Jakes intended to move forward with ministry, media, and philanthropic work, framing the moment around themes of healing and forward movement, while Youngblood has continued serving as senior pastor of his church in Pittsburgh. Legal observers note that the dismissal, while bringing a pause to the public fight, leaves the door open for the dispute to resurface down the road. Through all of it, health crisis, leadership transition, and legal battle, Jakes has made clear he has no intention of stepping out of public life. Instead, he has redirected much of his energy into a new project that reflects the lessons of the past year and a half. In November 2025, he partnered with iHeartMedia to launch a weekly podcast called NXT Chapter, premiering with Oprah Winfrey as his first guest. The show brings together influential voices from business, entertainment, and culture, including Denzel Washington, Jeezy Melody Hobson, and his own daughter Sarah Jakes Roberts, with each episode built around the pivots, setbacks, and turning points that shaped their lives. The project is framed as both a literal and symbolic next chapter for Jakes himself, an invitation for listeners to think through what their own next step looks like and how to get there. Taken together, these past 18 months tell the story of a man forced to reckon very publicly with his own limits. A heart attack that nearly killed him pushed Jakes to hand over the pulpit he built to his daughter and son-in-law. A lawsuit meant to clear his name instead dragged him through a year of competing accusations before ending without resolution. And rather than retreating from the spotlight, he has stepped into a new kind of role, one built less around preaching to a congregation and more around conversation with the wider world. Whether this marks a genuine new chapter or simply a new phase of the same long story remains to be seen. But for now, Bishop T.D. Jakes is still very much in the headlines, just not for the reasons anyone expected.